Hello everybody, my name is Eric, and one of my first tip videos was about the dangers of Windows XP and how out of date and insecure it is. So then, I was always asked, well, could you make a video about how to use it safely? And I always thought this was pretty much a lost cause, but recently a few things that are really cool have come out. So first of all, this is Legacy Update. This is a tool that can take your Windows XP all the way up to 2019. That does, I believe, include a patch for the Eternal Blue exploit that got us in the previous video, along with enabling the firewall and using this behind a NAT to minimize the risk of networms. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is more interesting. We have some browsers that are modern, such as Supermium, which is a modern version of Chromium. And then it gets even crazier because there's this new thing that's just recently come out called One Core API, and I'm going to show that off, that lets you run actual modern software on Windows XP in addition to enabling 128 gigabytes of RAM on 32-bit Windows XP. So I've got a pretty cool VM setup I'll show you to demonstrate all of this, and we'll see how it goes. So here we go. We've got 64... no, actually, we had to go with 16 because the VM simply blue screened with more, and while this says 3 gigabytes, I've actually passed 128 through. So first of all, let's go through Legacy Update. Now this is a tool to both make it so that old versions of Windows can install updates, which previously were the servers are shut down if you try to go through Windows Update, and to patch in the POS Ready updates. That was a specific embedded version of Windows XP intended for point-of-sale systems that was supported all the way to 2019. Primarily because Windows XP was a lot lighter weight than Windows 7 and Vista, and they wanted to avoid competition from Linux and other embedded systems. So they made a special lightweight operating system that happened to be compatible with XP. Now we've installed this. This is the same interface that you remember from Windows XP. I always found this odd back in the day that rather than having a Windows Update app, they actually did it all through the browser. But it kind of made sense because they had this thing called ActiveX that meant that the browser was basically could run apps. So let's download and install all these updates. And while we're waiting, how about a message from our sponsor to secure your business? Concerned about your organization's cybersecurity? Threats are escalating, and in 2025, the greatest risk, info stealers, have become increasingly sophisticated and difficult to detect. These stealthy attacks can compromise your system silently, leaving you unaware until long after it's too late. But what if you could change your approach? Instead of relying on your security vendor to identify every emerging threat, what if you could invert the problem and only allow software you trust? That's exactly where today's sponsor comes in, ThreatLocker. This video is sponsored by ThreatLocker, a zero-trust security solution that protects your organization with a simple yet powerful approach: deny by default. Unlike traditional antivirus solutions, ThreatLocker doesn't need to track down every potential threat. It simply ensures only approved, trusted software runs on your systems. ThreatLocker also includes ring fencing, an intuitive feature that restricts applications, even those you rely on, to only the access they need to work. This capability helps you eliminate unwanted telemetry and significantly reduces the risk posed by application-level vulnerabilities. Does this sound interesting? You can go to the link in the description, that is threatlocker.com/Eric Parker, to learn more about how ThreatLocker can help your organization, and you can get started with a free 30-day trial. Now, back to our main programming. On this version of Windows, you could actually choose when you wanted to update instead of having it done for you. Now we've got the full list of updates. And then we get this, and I've never really understood why people would voluntarily install this. You never had to. But I guess there was a genuine problem in the early 2000s of companies selling pirated software without being honest about it. So that's what Windows Genuine Advantage was designed to tackle. And now all of our updates have finished installing. We can look at our properties and just see if anything's changed. Just give that a second. And the only complaint we get now is about antivirus software. But I believe we actually do have Microsoft Security Essentials installed. Well, we'll deal with that in a second. So here we've got the One Core API. Now, when I first saw this in the Shorthorn project, as they call it, which is essentially to make Windows XP a modern operating system, and I thought, wow, this would take such a monumental amount of work. How could this possibly happen from an independent developer? Well, it did, but the biggest advantage they had is they're reusing a lot of code from Wine and ReactOS, because ReactOS is also, well, I shouldn't say based on Windows XP, because it's an independent free software project, but it is a free software reimplementation of Windows XP. So after extracting and downloading the file, we can now install this. Let's run the installer. The amount of stuff that works with this is genuinely incredible. We can go back to the GitHub and get an idea, but it is a lot of modern software and even modern drivers. Yeah, no, he's right. I always think Windows XP was the end of legacy Windows, and Windows Vista was the beginning of modern Windows. So to bring these together is a staggeringly impressive feat. So we extract it, we install it, and what we end up with is something that looks a bit like a service pack installer. Yep, I agree. Now, there was also for 95, there's something called Kernel X, which was a similar idea. That made 95 work with XP software, but getting this to work is just amazing when you consider that we are talking about software potentially from 15 or 20 years in the future. Windows XP got its last service pack in 2009, and it never got, even then, most of the APIs that came with Vista. Now, 20 years later, having APIs that make software that required Windows 7 or even 10 work is just amazing. So here's a long list of things that work, including a lot of development tools, FileZilla, the latest version of LibreOffice, which is a modern office software. Not the latest version of Discord, but there is a fork of Discord that works. Visual Studio 2012, Visual Studio Code up to the latest version. Chrome, Google Chrome, not this fork, and the latest version of Firefox, although on the very latest there are some bugs, SeaMonkey and Thunderbird, along with the Java Development Kit, although only for XP 64-bit, which we're not currently running, because I was interested to see 128 gigabytes of RAM on 32-bit XP. I know you could do 64. I didn't know you could do 128. I'm 50-50 between the issue being Okay, I'm going to try reducing the amount of memory then. Okay. The system now has 54 gigabytes of RAM. I nuked the VMware graphics driver because I thought that was the problem, and it turns out that was wrong, but we can probably fix that pretty easily. Let's just get the money shot of how much RAM we have, if we can. Yeah, so it will fix the hardware, the display in a second. Now let's try it out. So first of all, we can open Firefox again, and let's see if anything's changed. If we go to About, let's see if we can download Google Chrome. As you can see in Task Manager, we now can see the 50 gigabytes of RAM. The reason it didn't work, I'm guessing because of how physical address extension works and the number of bits available, simply not possible to have more than 64 gigabytes of RAM on a PAA system. Now let's see how Chrome works. The other thing they've added is the ability to spoof whatever version we want. Right, yes, on this version it's Documents Settings, and Downloads is inside Documents, which is a bit odd. So far, we're still on the latest supported version on Vista, but I believe we can fix that quite easily. See, if we simply declare this to be a Windows 10 system, all of a sudden, magic happens. Maybe we don't have to, maybe that's wrong. Okay, well, Firefox worked. I just told it I was running Windows 10, and it launched fine, and let's just see if the new version works. Wow! So we were running, let me just double check, what seems to be the latest... Okay, no, it goes like one channel at a time. But we're running Firefox versions that are not supported on Windows XP. And it just works. And this is Firefox Quantum, which was the new version that is supposedly faster. And that's working perfectly fine out of the box. And now we're on a new version again. And now we got to update again, but I think this ESR is actually still supported. Now let's see what happens if we use this version of Firefox to download Chrome. Yes, and it now recognizes this as Windows 10 32-bit, and we'll get a different install stub. Other programs will fail to install, and some things require AVX, which Windows XP just simply does not support. And that's also why the latest version of Firefox seems to have issues. Now here is a repackaged net framework as well, so that we can make that work. And here he's playing Minecraft on this. Now, that's interesting, because I did want to cover, if you did want to try this on a real computer, he's got the perfect system for it, because the last motherboard generation that can reasonably work with this hardware on bare metal is the Intel Haswell or Broadwell architecture, which is what the 5 here is. And the last GPU generation is the 900 series. Now, in my experience, because I did try this many years ago, the Maxwell drivers on XP are not that great, so you're probably just as good with any 700 series NVIDIA Kepler card. Kepler, Maxwell will both work. Anything newer than the 900 series won't, and AMD dropped support quite a while before that, so that's out. The last officially supported CPU generation to run on this is actually the AMD Bulldozer, but in practice you can get CPUs as new as Broadwell to work. I've also seen a couple of extreme overclocking motherboards that have Windows XP drivers for the sake of, because Windows XP will generally boot at a higher clock speed with an unstable overclock. Now let's see what else we can get going. Now, I really want to see Visual Studio Code. Is this VS Code or Copilot? Okay, I think this is Code. I don't really like this new site. Oh, this is 64-bit. See if we can find a 32-bit version. We would actually need the... Here we go. Got it. If we wanted to run the latest version, then we would need 64-bit Windows XP, which did exist. It just wasn't, it didn't really catch on, unlike later versions. Now, in the interest of using this in as safe as we can get, let's also see if we can get an antivirus going on here. We have Visual Studio Code. See if we can get Avast going. There is actually a legitimately supported antivirus for Windows XP, Panda. And Panda still has a version of antivirus that's supported on XP, so we can use that if this doesn't work. And despite an initial crash message, it does actually open and work. Now, it does tell me that I should stop using the 32-bit version, but I'm not listening. Okay, it's not super stable. Let's try setting this to what it asked for. We'll tell it that it's on Windows 7. We could update this, because sometimes you get weird rendering if you try Windows 7 specifically, because a lot of applications will try and support Arrow. Okay, let's just go with Panda, which is actually supported. Okay, let's see where our actual download button is. Major Geeks has it. And we also get an ad for AVG. So we could try that as well. The way that's capitalized just looks so malicious. So that one throws GDI errors, so let's try Malwarebytes. This just looks like it's not rendering properly. And now we've got PandaDome installed. Now, I haven't done any deep testing, and I couldn't attest to the reliability of this product. What was strange is, despite the fact that Windows XP is officially supported by Panda Antivirus, I had to go to great lengths and source a GDI+.dll. I finally found a working download for that, and I put that in the files, some CNET thing after you click through 3 ads, and it works. Maybe we could have gotten the other antiviruses working, but I honestly wouldn't recommend running an antivirus through a compatibility layer because it needs deep access, and I don't know how complete that would be with something like a kernel driver. So we do now have an antivirus, finally. We have a browser. Let's just try some random free software to see how usable this is. We have gotten some... Oh, what? Oh my. Okay, I think that's just because it opened Chrome. And it tries to upsell us to the paid version of PandaDome, which is fair enough. I got the free version off of Major Geeks because I couldn't navigate through their site without downloading 10 ads. Okay, so installing Panda Antivirus was not a great idea. I've done this before on an unmodified system without issue. I don't know if this GDI plus DLL is to blame. I don't know if deleting it is going to help, but it might at least stop this from stalling and crashing the whole system. And let's see if we can get LibreOffice going. If that's got a 64, unless it's hybrid, that's not going to work. Yeah, that was my bad. Of course, everything defaults to 64-bit these days, which is a whole other problem, even if you do. So now we've got the 32-bit. Even if you do get Windows XP working. I don't think we're going to get an antivirus going. PandaDome almost destroyed the system. None of the others even work, so we'll spoof a different version. You just go... Well, that could be trouble. I wonder if we can fix that by simply changing MSI exec. Okay, so it seems like it's impossible to install it with an MSI installer, but luckily there is a portable version which should work. Now, what else do we need? Well, a modern operating system needs an email client, so let's try out Thunderbird. This might be a 64-bit app. Nope. Oh, looks fine. Okay, that was just that wasn't a hard fail. It was just an association issue. And there we go. We've got Thunderbird that looks perfect, although it is themed for Windows 10, but that's not the end of the world. Now let's see if we can get a word processor going. We have other things. Calc, which is their Excel clone, is another tool that a lot of people want. See if that works. We can also see we're using almost 4 gigabytes of RAM, which on Windows XP is a lot. Now, something you may not have known is while physical address extension does really work, and we do really have 54 gigabytes of RAM on this system, unlike on a 64-bit system, a single process could use all of that with no trouble. On this, each process, in theory, is limited to 4 gigabytes due to address space, but because of how the address space is actually configured, it's 2 gigabytes. There is an option you could use in the bootloader to raise that to 3 gigabytes, but as far as I know, that's actually incompatible with physical address extension. So you only get 2 gigabytes per app, but as this was initially designed for Windows Server before 64-bit CPUs were mainstream, it was useful for that. So far, none of these are working. Seems like we're having a bit of a graphics issue with that. Got Thunderbird going. Well, we could always try WPS Office instead, which is a much more faithful clone of Microsoft Office. Now, it is free to download, but it is not open source. However, it does... Oh, okay, that didn't work. It does look a lot like Microsoft Office. There is also only Office, but I don't think that's going to work if these two failed. We can also use Legcord, which is designed... still doesn't work on Windows XP out of the box, but it is designed to be more lightweight than the latest versions of Discord. And it also comes with a nice portable format in case we can't get the installer to work. But we would... Okay, so it seems like we'd need to be running a 64-bit version of XP. And it seems like a theme here is that this really would be better on a 64-bit operating system. Which, of course, so is literally everything. You know, no one... Yeah, like, even if we did have Windows 10 32-bit, it wouldn't be a lot better. So let's just see. I don't think this will work, but we might at least get a splash. No, it doesn't work. It wasn't expected to either. And one last thing we can try is Kden Live. We do, of course, have Movie Maker, but okay. Actually, no, the standalone might be easier. But given I don't see an option for 32-bit, I don't think this is going to work. Could probably go far enough back. But old version, like, whatever you want to say about recent versions of Kden Live, old versions of Kden Live are absolutely miserable. You know, they don't even have builds for old versions, so that's not going to work. So then, can you daily drive Windows XP in 2025 with modern software? Not yet. But this is impressive, especially given how quickly this has come up. We already have several modern applications, including a modern web browser. So I should walk that back. The answer is maybe. If you can do everything you need to do in a web browser, and you're not super bothered about security, it is possible. Would I recommend it? No. Could it be done? Yes. And what's really interesting is if you compared this to the Windows 95 video I made a few weeks ago, The difference is night and day. Even Windows XP with no modifications is just so much more modern because it's still based on a kernel that is ultimately still modern. It's amazing how fast things were changing in that period. From 1995 to 2001, you went from not really being able to do anything a few years later to Windows XP. And then a few years later, you had Windows Vista, which is halfway to modern Windows. So that's going to be all from me for now. Please let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. Bye.